Everybody's getting quiet, and I don't know if the time's right or not, but I guess it's about time for us to get started. There it is. Julia kept me straight last week by saying which number we on, so I put out a new one to let us know what number we were on. And I skipped. Let me get this right. I did 145, but 144, we're going to go to Matthew 22 and 144 on that guide there. And we're going to go to verse 34. And we're going to start about the greatest commandment. Tom, would you pray us in right quick before we start?
Father in heaven, we're so thankful for the wonderful Lord's Day. Bless us in our study. We're thankful, Father, that we can love you and love others and help us to be more diligent in doing that. Forgive us and help us to go to heaven so that heaven can be our home. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Any announcements we need to make or anything that it'll be announced today in church. Y'all pray for my aunt. Amy's aunt knows my aunt real well. Her name is Linda Bristow. She lost a grandson in Longview Saturday night. He stepped out in front of a car and the car killed him. And it was a horrific incident. And all I'll say, I'll just be honest about it. Addiction's a horrible thing. And my aunt she was very close with him. She was, when the Lord's good to us better than we deserve, she was certainly better to him. And that was one of her grandsons that she loved. Her name's Linda Bristow, so just keep her in your prayers. Okay, we're starting in Matthew 22:34, and it says the greatest commandment, and everybody here can quote it. And I've got a few thoughts, I guess you'd say why he said this, but he was questioned again. So I'll just read it, but I want to know why he says this. But when the Pharisees heard he had silenced the Sadducees, and we talked about that, and Dan was right, they never left him alone, and this is going to prove it. They gathered together. Then one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question, testing him again, and saying, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" Jesus said to him in verse 37, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment." I'm going to go over again. With all your heart, all your soul, all your mind. He said this was the greatest. The second, he discussed it, is like you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Short, simple. Any comments about that? Why should we do that? Number one, if we're going to love God with all our heart, mind, and soul, we're going to do right. We're going to do what he asks us to do, which is take care of the needy. If we care about lost souls enough, when we see the opportunity, we're going to take it. And with the mind, I would say that reverts to good thoughts, studying the Bible so it does produce good thoughts. And then the second one is love your neighbor as yourself. So any comments on that great commandment? That could dive deep and cover a lot of territory. People that's households of faith or not, we're going to treat them good. Why? Because of this commandment. Because this is what he told us to do. And that means a ton of things. Going to serve people when we don't want to, when we're tired, when we're really relaxed and we've worked all day and somebody really needs our help. We got to show them. Going to somebody's when they've lost a loved one. Mourning with them is the great Beatitude says. So that, and he also, I guess I missed this, of these two commandments, hang all the law and the prophets on. All of it. This is it. This is where it starts. We got to care about people. That pretty much sums that up, I think. Any comment on that? I think it's pretty straightforward. That's what I'm exactly. He- I think you're right. I think you're exactly right. We're going to go ahead and go into, he really gets on them here. And this covers a lot of reading here. And we can really delve into this. We're just going right into verse 23. And I'm going to give a little introduction to this. He's really hammering them. Ain't he, Jay? He is letting them have it right here. He's getting down close to the end of his life. And I guess the saying this day and time is, tell them how you really feel. Why don't you just tell me how you really feel? Well, he's doing that here in chapter 23. Then Jesus spoke to the multitudes and his disciples, saying, the scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. Therefore, whatever they tell you to observe, that observe and do, but you do not do according to their works, for they say and do not. This is interesting. For they bind heavy burdens, hard to bear, and they lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves will not move them with their fingers, but all their works they do to be seen by men. They make their phylacteries. I've tried and worked on that word, and Jay got it. Phylacteries. Broad and in large borders of their garments. Okay, I couldn't pronounce it, but I have studied it. Phylacteries. What is it? What are we talking about? Scott walked in at the right time.
What are we talking about?
Phylacteries.
They're tassels. They're tassels on their clothes.
Okay, I looked it up, and it said it was a leather pouch, square, that they keep these rules in. It was, maybe I'm wrong, but that's what Google took me to. Could you say that if a preacher goes and I've seen him before, he takes that Bible and he strolls around the room and he talks, but he never opens it, would that be a phylactery? That's, when they talked about this little leather pouch that they held their rules and all that in and let them, they had it on a belt, what I looked up and said they walked around with it.
It was an outward sign that people could see. So, when you walk down the street, they say, "Ooh, he's a holy person."
Yeah.
It's like wearing a Jesus t-shirt.
Is it, here I go, maybe I'm not hurting. Is it like wearing that cone that goes on your head and they walk down the aisle with that on and all that?
Well, it's just a public display or an outward appearance.
And I'm not trying to be political here or nothing. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but I do not, for the life of me, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole. To this day, I'll never know where any of that came from.
Or even little boxes on the forehead with scripture in it.
I guess that's what I'm trying to say, because it defined it as a little leather box. I'm in chapter 5. What about this binding things on them and they won't move a little finger? Can anybody talk about that for me? That's all.
Don't do as I say and don't do as I do.
That's what I thought. That's all. But all their works in verse 5, they do not be seen by men. They make their phylacteries. Did I get that right, Jay? Phylacteries broad and enlarge the borders of their garments. What is he talking about there? Anybody got any ideas?
You could go back to the old law, like Exodus or maybe Leviticus, and read about the priestly garments and
Right.
those type of things.
Isn't that where we get some of this other that I'm talking about? So it all comes, it's got to. Somebody thought it up. They love their best places at feasts, best seats in the synagogues, greetings in the marketplaces, and called by men, Rabbi, Rabbi. But you do not be called Rabbi, for one is your teacher, the Christ. You are all brethren. Do not call anyone on your earth your father, for one is your Father, he who is in heaven. And do not be called teacher, for one is your teacher, the Christ. Be who is greatest among you shall be your servant. And whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. I'll drive a nail right there. Any comment? Then that in the afterlife? Just go and do your good work here. You'll get exalted after it's over with. That's the only way. I think you can't read it any other way.
Wearing of these phylacteries and clothing to be seen of men, people do the same thing today.
Oh,
They wear this, these scarves, and so you'll know that they are a teacher or a preacher or a priest or whatever.
that's
Same identical thing.
you. If you go and look on television, these guys will walk around and they'll hold that Bible and they don't ever open it at a time, and they'll preach it up. And I'm not here picking on anybody. Yes, I agree with that. Nothing's changed. It's all the same under the sun. But woe to you, scribes and Pharisees and hypocrites, for you shut up the kingdom of heaven against men. For you neither go in yourselves, nor do you allow those who are entering to go in. Is he talking about the temple there? Worship. I didn't look that up, but that's what I would think. And if anybody tells me different, I'm ready to learn right here. Because 14 says, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you devour widows' houses, and for a pretense make long prayers. Therefore will receive greater condemnation. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you travel land and sea to win one proselyte, and when he is won, you make him twice as much a son of hell as yourself. Any comments on that one? I looked up proselyte. Now I done forgot what it meant. If anybody wants to look that up while I'm reading, they can. I did the practice, the phylacteries, but I did not look up, and I've heard the word.
I think you could roughly define it as converting someone to a different belief system.
That you hold?
Yes, right. If they were a Gentile, say, if they were a pagan, well, they would be converted to Judaism. So that would be a proselyte.
Right.
Or you could make a modern day.
Apostasy and proselyte are maybe the same thing.
Proselyte is just converting a person from one belief system to another.
Okay. Apostasy is turn your back on the truth, correct? Okay.
They're getting them out of something they believe and bringing them in something that's just as bad, if not worse, so they're worse off now than they were to begin with.
Exactly. Exactly. And we've seen examples of that. Woe to you, blind guides, who say, whoever swears by the temple, it is nothing, but whoever swears by the gold of the temple, he is obliged to perform it. Fools and blind, for which is greater, the gold or the temple that sanctifies the gold? And whoever swears by the altar, it is nothing, but whoever swears by the gift that is on it, he is obliged to perform it. Fools and blind, for which is greater, the gift or the altar that sanctifies the gift? Therefore, he who swears by the altar swears by it, and in all things on it. He's basically just telling them, y'all are a bunch of hypocrites. That's the best way I know to sum it up. He who swears by the temple swears by it. He goes on. He who dwells in it And he who swears by heaven swears by the throne of God. That's what really counts, and by him sits on it. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you pray tithe of mint and anise and cumin, and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faith. These you ought to have done, without leaving the others undone. Blind guides who strain, how many times have we heard this? Who strain at a gnat and swallow a camel. Anybody want to make any comment on that? Are we talking about legalism there a lot? I think we are. That's the best analogy I can give of it. And he goes on, woe you scribes and Pharisees, for you cleanse the outside of the cup. Now this is the best explanation in Texas terms, I think. For you clean the outside of the cup and the dish, but inside are full of extortion and self-indulgence. I don't know what your New King or your regular King James is reading that. Blind Pharisees first cleanse the blind Pharisees. That's what he's addressing them. Blind Pharisee. First clean the inside of the cup and the dish, that the outside of them may be clean also. I don't know if that would, you got to look at your inner self, I think is what he's trying to say there. That's the best I can say it. You might look real good on the outside. Let's skip to 28, because it's even so you are also outwardly appear righteous to men, but inside you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. That's looking right at me. And you, what does Paul say? He buffeted his body daily to make sure he was right. And Wednesday night, Jay talked about the things that ailed Paul or ailed him. His conscience may have been pulling at him like this as much as he's done. He goes on in 30 to say, if we lived in the days of our fathers, we would not have been partakers with them in the blood of the prophets. Therefore, you are witnesses against yourselves that you are sons of those who murdered the prophets. Fill up then the measure of your father's guilt. And he calls them serpents, brood of vipers. How can you escape the condemnation of hell? Therefore, indeed, I send your prophets, wise men and scribes. Some of them you will kill and crucify, and some of them you will scourge in your synagogues, persecute in the city. And the last verse on this ridicule, that you may come all righteousness, bloodshed on the earth, from blood righteousness, able to the blood of Zechariah, son of whom you murdered between the temple and the altar. And then the final verse in 36, surely I say to you, all these things will come up upon this generation. So what he's foreshadowing, all this is going to happen to you. I mean, that's a lot of ridicule for hypocrisy there. Any comment on all of that before we move on? That's a lot. We're going to go on to giving. If I can find it, the widow. Jesus recognizes the widow's offering. That's in, I'm reading one. I want to read out of a commentary on that. This is some studying I've done on this. We're in, I want to look at Mark 12, 41 through 44 on that, as far as the choice of the gospel. You can turn in your books to these verses. Okay, now he sat down opposite of the treasurer and began observing how the people were putting money into the treasury. He had one commentary. I had these pipes, these chutes. Have you ever heard of this, Jay, where they put the money down the chutes? Well, that's one commentary. Here's what he said. And many rich people were putting in large sums. Then in verse 42, he said, a poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which was the amount of a cent. 2 copper coins in the amount of a cent. Calling his disciples to him, he said to them, truly I say to you, this poor widow put in more than all the contributions to the treasury, for they all put in out of their surplus. We don't have a surplus in this budget, so they put in what they had extra. Is that what he's trying to say? And then they had plenty left over after that. But she, out of her poverty, put in all she owned and all she had to live on. Any comment about that at all? That sums it up.
I heard one time I read that a mite, 2 mites was 1% of a denarius, which is a day's wages. So she gave 1% of a day's wages. Sounds really small, but in God's eyes, it was everything.
She loved Jesus.
She's poor. That's the point.
She loved Jesus.
She had a lot of trust, or she would have been in those things.
That was a lot of faith, wasn't it?
I've heard it said that this Greek word refers to these 2 coins amounted to a penny, and a penny was 1/64th of a day's wage. That's not very much, and that was all she had.
To her name.
1/64th of a day's wage.
Pretty small.
Kind of different from what Scott had. Mine's got 1/64th of a day's wage. I think a day's work then was what, a denarius? So this was 1/64th.
She,
Very poor individual.
do you think she could have been bitter and griped about life? God said, boy, I've been dealt a horrible hand. She could have went that way, but she didn't. She probably had a lot going on in her life that she'd probably seen a lot of hard times. And yet she does this. That's what he's trying to teach us here, I think. I want to read a little something out of this commentary that I think is pretty good. Jesus looked at giving in the temple. The Tuesday before Jesus died, on Friday, had been an exhausting day. All day long, the Lord had engaged in a war of words with enemies who repeatedly tried to trick him and trap him. As our story begins, Jesus had retired to the court of the woman where the temple treasure was located. He had taught in this part of the temple before. According to Alfred Ernisham, the treasurer, have anybody ever heard of Alfred Ernisham? The treasure consisted of 13, here we go, Jay, this is what I'm talking about. 13 trumpet-shaped containers located in one part of the court. My understanding is that the base was the widest. Each part of these containers from the bottom to the top, it became narrower. Coins were dropped in an opening at the top. Each receptacle was marked with a letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and the money was placed in each used for a different temple function. I guess they had it categorized. And sacrifices, upkeep, and so on. They were for voluntary offerings. On our special occasions, such as feast days, many came to make free will contributions. Jesus sat down opposite of the treasure, which I've already read about in Mark 12:41, for the moment. He was by himself. Shortly thereafter, he called his disciples to him. They must have been elsewhere in the area, no doubt. He savored the respite. He apparently sat for a while with downcast eyes, even closing his eyes. But then he looked up and began observing how people were putting money into the treasure. The Greek word translated word putting, this looks like it's in and there's no way I can pronounce that. I thought that when I was reading this. Can be also translated into or throwing. The King James Version says that the people cast money into the treasure. Earlier, Christ had said that some people made a production of their giving. I'm going to stop right there. That's enough on that commentary, but that kind of gives you an eye about this, a vision of it. Have you seen, do people make a production of it?
They must have been Pharisees.
Mike, as you read that, and you said they were basically putting their money down a funnel.
Yeah.
And so if you had a big pile of money, I'm sure it would make a lot of noise. Like jingle, jingle.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
So that would be something to be proud of.
Oh, aren't we doing good?
Yeah, at the sound, and I'm sure when the will place her two little coins in, it wouldn't make much noise.
You know, I'm going down a rabbit hole, I guess, but when you're really true faith and love like this widow does, what was she doing? She was taking a chance, was she not? What am I going to eat tomorrow? How's life going to be? I'm giving. Have we ever? And I'm not preaching here, folks. I'm preaching to me, if anybody. Have we ever had enough faith to really take a chance on somebody?
That's what Jesus taught in the latter part of the middle part of the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 6. He said, what are you worried about? You're worried about what you're going to wear, what you're going to eat. So this is a demonstration.
It really is. To my opinion, she was bold. Bottom line, she was a bold lady. But I thought that was something interesting to share with you, how he sit there and just kind of sit down there and notice it. We're going. Yes. Any other comments on, we could talk about this giving, we could sit down and talk about it all day long. I watch a lot of documentaries. I've watched the one on Jim Jones, and I sure have watched the one on David Koresh. It's just like a lot of evangelists use this widow, but in a way, in a very, I'm going to use the word nefarious way. I believe, I'm not being judgmental, but they do. The one thing Phil Sanders says every week, and I said it before, we're not after your money. The first thing he says when that radio program comes, we don't want your money, and that's impressive. We're fixing to get into something that basically I'm going to need your help with. I've done a lot with it, but we're going to Matthew 24. And it covers 51 verses. If you look at that, and it's number 148 on your curriculum, Jesus talks about the future. And something that always has thrown me off is this destruction of the temple thing. I haven't understood it. I've heard people talk about it one time a long time ago at work, that it was just a horrible thing, and he predicts it. So as we go into Matthew 24 and discuss these verses, I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, but I'm in the New King James Version. The curriculum, I did not print out the words from it because it's King James Version. I stay with the New King James, but I know y'all got several versions out there, so here we go with the first few verses. Then Jesus went out. Now remember, he's getting down to his last days. Then Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came up to show him the buildings of the temple. And Jesus said to him, "Do you not see all these things? Assuredly, I say to you, not one stone shall be left here upon another, that shall not be thrown down." Okay, he goes into verse 3, the signs of times at the end of the age. Now, as I sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to, now as he sat on the side of the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately and saying, "Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign?" Jay's been talking about this on Wednesday night. "What will be the sign of your coming at the end of the age?" Here's Jesus, and Jesus answered them, and he said, and said to them, "Take heed that no one deceives you, for many will come in my name, saying, I'm the Christ, and will deceive many. And you will hear wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled, for all these things will come to pass, but the end is not yet. I'm going to stop right there for discussion. What's going on here? Nothing's really changed under the sun. If somebody doesn't believe in the Bible or God and they read this, and my grandmother always, I remember her saying it, and she had 2 sons in Korea, 3 sons, I think, or 2, Karen could probably tell me, in Korea, 2 sons at the same time. At the same time, right in the middle of it. And my mother always told me, and then I heard her again during the Vietnam conflict, there'll be wars and rumors of wars. So it's right there. And do we not, if we're not at war, we're talking about discord and going to war with somebody? It's all around us. Any comment on that? Here we go, more. And there will be famines, there will be pestilence and earthquakes in various places. And these are all the beginning of sorrows. There again, our disaster relief, Kenneth will tell you, you've helped a lot of people that's went through this stuff, haven't you? We have here. All the time. We help other places. I mean, that's just, then they will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you, and you will be hated by all nations for my sake. And then many will be offended. Then many will be offended, will betray one another, and will hate one another. Then many false prophets will rise up and deceive many, and because lawlessness will be abound, the love of many will grow cold. But he who endures to the end will be saved. Isn't this again in Revelation also? I believe. This sure, I guess the word I'll use is debunk the once saved, always saved theory. He endures to the end. Paul said, I've fought the good fight. But that pretty much sums it up. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached no matter what in all this world as a witness to all nations, and then the end will come. Okay, great tribulation in verse 15. Therefore, when you see the abomination, desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, whoever reads, let him understand. Then let those who are in Judah flee to the mountains. Let him who is on the housetop not go down to take anything out of his house. And let him who is in the field not go back to get his clothes. But woe to those who are pregnant and to those who are nursing babies in those days. And pray that your flight may not be in the winter or on the Sabbath. For then there will be great tribulation, such as has been since the beginning of the world, until this time, no, nor ever shall be. And unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved, but for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. Then if anyone says to you, look, here's the Christ, or there, do not believe it. For false Christs and false prophets will rise and show great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. So I've told you beforehand. Therefore, if they say to you, look, he is in the desert, do not go out or look. He is in the inner room, do not believe it. For as the lightning comes for the east and flashes to the west, so also will be the coming of Son of Man. Anybody want to elaborate on all of that?
I don't think all of this we've just read is talking about the destruction of the temple. This is not the end of time. This is the end of the Jewish nation as a nation. If they
I agree. I agree.
Jews didn't believe that could happen.
They didn't, because that was their Mecca, right?
Impossible.
Okay, was he comparing this to the end of time also?
Oh, yes.
No, he will. If you keep reading,
Yeah, he's gonna get to that.
Yeah, he does.
but this chapter is confusing because Jesus talks about several,
It is very, Karen, what were you saying?
not just the end of time.
Yeah, his prefaces was talking about the building, they were talking about the temple, look at all these temples, and he says, not one of these stones is gonna be left, and then he goes into this about the destruction of the temple.
Yeah, what she said, like Tom said, to the Jews, that was blasphemy.
Okay, because this was their world, right? This was it. They worshipped they thought it was holy, correct? Am I right?
Well, if you think about,
Still feel that way.
yeah, if you think about the gospel,
Things haven't changed.
if you think about the gospels altogether, think about how many times the temple is mentioned and how significant the temple was during that time. Well, it was just like it was the center of life.
Right. It was like they came there for everything, didn't they? Okay, what are we, okay, why did he throw in there one who endures to the end will be saved in that? And I'm asking, and I'm supposed to be teaching this class, but he also puts that in there.
Well, that section might be, he might be telling us there, you know what? The world's gonna keep rotating.
There you go, okay.
Things are gonna happen, nature's gonna continue, all these things are gonna happen until I come back again.
Okay, and I see, and also deeper in this chapter, because we still got 30 more verses to go, the coming of the Son of Man is next.
People were worshiping the created thing, which was the temple, instead of the one that was created, that was, did all that. They quit worshiping God and was worshiping the temple and everything that was in the
So we're getting into paganism there, aren't we?
the law. They were worshiping it rather than the one that gave the law.
Right. What was, he even talked about it in there, it was bad for a woman pregnant during this time. Was he talking about that? And I'm being wide open here.
Whenever, in AD 70 was when the Romans came in and basically obliterated Jerusalem.
Okay.
And I truly believe it's a reference to the fact that people had to leave whenever the destruction of the temple.
There you go. That's,
And it would have been harder if it had been on Sabbath or if you'd been pregnant. because
there you go.
You didn't travel.
There you go. Okay.
I mean, when in AD 70, Rome came along and they destroyed Jerusalem was gone. They took the rocks. They took everything.
So if I'm right, AD 70, here I go, leaving about 30 years after Christ was crucified. He lived 33 years.
And I've always understood the abomination and desolation had to do with the destruction of the temple. Because an abomination, I don't remember exactly the way that you looked at it, but it's basically making something that's holy unholy. So when Rome ran in there and took out the temple, they removed what they considered holy from Jerusalem.
You know, we couldn't have been talking about the end of time because it said, when you see all this coming, you go to the mountains, the end of time is coming just like that.
Right. But today, and I did use the wars and rumors of war today because we're looking at the end of time now. My grandmother used to use that analogy, and that still does apply today. Things are going to go on, and
Well, we know we're living in the end, you know,
In the
the
last
last
days.
days.
in the last days,
And it's gonna go on until Christ comes back.
exactly.
And in the last days, since Jesus went back to heaven, last days might be 100,000 years. We don't know.
Right. And here's what I'm going to, and I don't know if any of these people, and I'm going down a rabbit hole a little bit again, but he can convince these people that got all these people give their money and go get in this compound. And I don't know if Koresh told these people it was coming on a certain day or not. I don't think he or Jim Jones did that. And I've studied about him because how one man, and these people that follow him, they went to Harvard. They have degrees. They're smart people. But yet they were searching so hard for something other than this that they believed this guy. You know, it's just I don't understand how one human being can have that much charisma, but they do. I mean, you can look at several things, and I guess I am kind of going down a rabbit hole, but he warned, did he not warn you about those people in this first part of this? He warned you. He said, they'll come. They'll say, I'm the Christ. So I think you've helped me today, Kenneth, Scott, and Tom, and Jay, understand more about it. Because this destruction of the temple was their world.
They worship that temple other than God that created.
He hated paganism. So, what Tom said today, the temple, they go to temple to worship still, right? On Saturday, isn't that their day? So they call it going to temple. Is there a temple around here in Bowie County? There is one?
I'm sure there is.
I'm sure there is too. I think I've heard of it.
You know, he told them, he said, hey, one of these days is coming that you don't have to go into Jerusalem and worship. You can worship God anywhere. And that day is already here.
That's true. Well, we're going to continue on next week. We are going to start with 29, and it says the coming of the Son of Man. And if y'all want to go back, I'm going to do some research. We can revisit this before we move on. I would like to, so I'm challenging myself to go back and study this a little bit before we move on. And but we will start there in 24 verse 29 next week. I've enjoyed it. I hope y'all have enjoyed it as much as I have.